After days of deadlock, the UN Security Council has unanimously voted for an immediate 30-day ceasefire across Syria. It will allow aid to reach areas including the rebel-held eastern Ghouta area, where more than 500 civilians are said to have been killed in government airstrikes in just the past week. Syrian rebel groups welcomed the vote, which had been delayed repeatedly by Russia, an ally of the Syrian government. The leaders of France and Germany will speak by phone on Sunday with President Putin to push for the truce to take hold in the coming days. Nick Bryant reports.
The people of eastern Ghouta woke up this morning to continued aerial bombardment. And the news from New York that the Security Council remained deadlocked and still couldn't reach agreement on how to bring about even a temporary halt to the killing. Delay in Syria always brings more death. At least 120 children have been killed since Sunday, according to human rights activists. Hospitals overwhelmed by the number of casualties have been targets of the government's bombing. On the fringes of the Security Council, the tensest of negotiations, but always a sense of urgency from the backers of this resolution, and always the unresolved question, would Russia allow it to pass?
I would call upon those who are in favor of the draft resolution to raise their hand.
When it came to a vote, the Russian ambassador held his arm aloft, not to wield a veto, but to finally agree. Yet Western diplomats still attack Moscow for delaying its passage for days.
As they dragged out the negotiation, the bombs from Assad's fighter jets continued to fall. In the 3 days it took us to adopt this resolution, how many mothers lost their kids to the bombing and the shelling?
While we have been arguing over commas, Assad's planes have been killing more civilians in their homes and in their hospitals, imposing unbearable suffering.
The Russian ambassador was pessimistic about the chances of the ceasefire, saying there weren't concrete guarantees from warring parties to abide by it. This resolution brings the hope, at least, that aid convoys will soon be driving through these streets and medical evacuations can finally take place. But even after the Security Council agreed its passage, reports came from eastern Ghouta that government warplanes were continuing their week-long bombardment. Nick Bryant, BBC News, New York.
Well, earlier I spoke to Dr. Ahmad Tarakci. He is the president of the Syrian American Medical Society, which is a non-profit, non-political medical relief organization for Syrians in need. And I asked him if he was pleased with the resolution that had passed.
I think this is a very good first step. The civilians on the ground in eastern Ghouta are concerned and skeptical about the implementation of this resolution. Yet I think it's a very good step because we've been calling for that all along, that the warring sides have to stop and civilians should be able to have unlimited access to their humanitarian needs and medical treatment.
Okay, so what is that? What are those humanitarian needs that are required by the citizens in that part of Syria?
I think from supply standpoint of view, at this point, the medical capacity of the hospitals inside eastern Ghouta had dropped to about 40% of its status a week ago before the escalation. We're talking about antibiotics, pain medication, anesthesia medications, surgical supplies. We've been asking for surgical supplies for 3.5 years, and no UN convoy has been able to allow or to bring in any surgical supplies to eastern Ghouta, pushing the civil society to count basically on the black markets. That's not acceptable. But beyond that, the monitoring mechanism is the most important thing. We have seen even good initiatives for medical evacuation, as we've seen a few months ago in eastern Ghouta, turned around to become a bargaining chip. And we're not going to accept that. I received actually many phone calls from physicians and doctors from the United States and Europe who are willing to go and monitor the medical evacuation, provide consultation for patients to help them out, and also monitor the hospitals to make sure that those hospitals are as transparent and as civil of structures as they are, and that will be a needed
because that is
right
a crucial issue, because very often the rebels have been accused of using medical facilities as human shields, as places for them to hide.
Well, from our standpoint of view, we've been always offering, at least for the last 2.5 years, we've been always offering, sharing the coordinates of the hospitals, providing live streaming from the hospitals. The hospitals are well known to the UN agencies and WHOs. We are asking for people to monitor on the ground to assure the transparency of our operation. And we've been asking only for guarantees from the UN security members. How would you protect us from airstrikes if we share with you all this information?
Okay.
So that has been the problem. And now people are saying we are willing to go inside the hospitals and provide that monitoring as well to make sure those attacks on hospitals are stopped completely and for good in Syria.